Colin. It's good to see you today.
You too. Sorry I was late. The day got away from me.
I understand. I'm curious though. The day got away from you. What do you mean by that?
You know, I was busy working and all of a sudden it was 2:55, so I rushed out of the office trying to get here by 3. Traffic is always a pain and I got stuck behind a school bus, so I got here late. I'm really sorry.
Look, I'm not upset that you were late. I'm really just trying to figure out maybe the circumstances that led you to being late so we can work through that, okay? Over the past several weeks, we've talked a lot about the challenges that you've had, and I know one of the things that you said was that keeping track of time. Would that be right?
Yes, I'd say it's probably in the top 3 of my list.
Okay. And the other 2 you identified were being able to complete tasks and controlling your emotions. Would you agree?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. So just looking at my notes here, last week we started working together on ways we could reduce or eliminate some of those challenges. We had talked about some possibilities, and you left saying you really wanted to try some things on your own. So how did that go? What did you try?
They went okay, but not as well as I'd hoped. What I did was you mentioned the visual cues that might help, so I started using Post-it notes.
Okay. So how did you use the Post-it notes?
I bought a bunch of Post-it notes and I placed them in my office, on my nightstand, and in the living room, and in my car. I even put some in my pants pocket.
Okay.
Whenever something came up that I needed to do or remember, I wrote it down.
Okay. So after you wrote something on the Post-it, then what happened with that note?
I either stuck it on my desk or the bathroom mirror or the dashboard, so I'd look at it later. But I still miss a lot of things.
Okay. So can you give me an example of something you missed? Kind of walk me through where you were when you wrote the note and what happened there.
Well, let me think. All right. Patricia called me at work and asked me to pick up milk on the way home. So I wrote it down on a Post-it note and I put it next to my cell phone on my desk. I figured that way I would see it when I grabbed my phone to leave. But then I ended up spending the rest of the day in the conference room, so I went back to my office to get to see the note. When I got home without the milk, Patricia was annoyed. She asked why I didn't put the Post-it note in the car because then I would have seen it when I left. But I couldn't really walk out of my office to my car and put it on my dash then.
I can see how that would be inconvenient, being at work and having to walk out to your car.
Exactly. It was raining out, and I just didn't have time to go out there and do that and come back into the meeting. I really thought that what I did would work.
Okay. So when you realized the Post-it didn't help you remember, how did you feel?
I was very frustrated.
I can understand that. What kind of thoughts were going on in your mind?
First, I was yelling at myself for forgetting, and then I took a deep breath, and I figured I better go get the milk. So I walked out of the car and drove to the store.
Colin, you seem to look a little distraught. Can you tell me what you're thinking right now?
I don't know. I guess I'm worried that I'm not doing this right.
Okay. So why do you think you're not doing this right?
I failed. If I was doing this right, I wouldn't have failed.
So you're saying in this particular situation with Patricia, you can't think of one thing in the situation that you did right?
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
So how did you respond when your wife was annoyed at you?
Took a deep breath, and I stepped away.
Okay. So what response would you have had in the same situation just 3 months ago?
I wouldn't have breathed. I probably would have yelled at her for just not getting the milk herself.
Okay. So is it fair to say you've been making strides forward, that maybe the reminder system didn't work quite right, but the way you responded to the situation did?
Yeah, I guess it did.
Okay. So now how do you feel about the situation?
Well, that makes me feel a little better. I know I messed up, but you're right. I didn't explode, and after I returned with the milk, we had a really nice dinner with the family.
Well, great. I think it's really important as we're working through all of this that you recognize the positives. It's not always going to go smoothly. Things are always going to happen. But I think it's really important that you take the time to step back and realize what is going well. Now, let's travel back to the time when Patricia called you initially. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So just let me read this back to you and tell me if I'm saying this correctly. So you're sitting at your desk and she calls, you answer the phone, and she asks you to pick up milk. You say yes, you write it on the Post-it, and then you set the Post-it on your desk right by where you keep your cell phone.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And then I go about my day, but my schedule changed, so I didn't really go back to see the reminder.
Okay. So can you think of a different method that may have worked even if your schedule had changed?
What do you mean?
I mean, sometimes things won't go according to plan. While the Post-it method works if you remember to write it down, you remember where you put it, you remember to look at it and follow through, it's not always going to work when something changes. It takes you away from the place or you forget. So, is there something you could put in place that might eliminate this change factor?
Let me think. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Can't think of anything.
Okay. So, is there anything that you typically have with you pretty often?
My cell phone is pretty much connected to me. Now, I could put reminders on my cell phone.
Right. So what would that look like?
I could use the notepad and type in reminders.
Okay, perfect. So the next question is, how do you guarantee yourself you'll look at those?
I do check my phone throughout the day, and usually I look at it during transitions, like when I'm leaving the house or packing up to go to work. I could just make a habit of always checking the notes during that time.
Okay, that's good. Are you willing to take this a step further?
Sure. What are you thinking?
So I'm trying to think of a way we can minimize the risk that you won't remember to check it. Say you're in a rush.
I could change my home screen to read check notes. But that only works if I'm looking at my home screen. It would be annoying, but I could set my alarm to go off at times when I usually am going from one thing to the next.
Okay. The alarm on the phone is a good idea, but I suspect that if you're at work in a meeting and your alarm goes off, that could be a little troublesome. Yeah, so let's put a pin in that because I think that idea connects to one that we were talking about earlier. I'm so sorry about that interruption. So what we were talking about is kind of putting a pin in what we were originally discussing and looking back at earlier when we were talking about losing track of time. Have you given any thought to things you can put in place to help you stay on top of your time management?
I haven't yet, no.
Okay. Well, one thing that I found that works for some people is finding a way to wake themselves up and getting back into focus, such as using a timer. A timer can be set and it kind of, when it goes off, it kind of snaps you back into where you need to be. What do you think?
Wouldn't that still be an issue during meetings, like we talked about earlier?
Well, it could have used your cell phone, but there's a lot of things out there now, particularly specifically for ADHD. For example, there's watches that have a variety of settings on them. You can set a timer for like an alarm to go off, or you can set something that goes off every 15 minutes. And it can be set to vibrate. So it's not your phone that could be across the room vibrating. It's right on your wrist. You would feel it. So you could set it for whatever would work for you in that situation.
So if I set it for 15 minutes, the watch would vibrate my wrist, reminding me to get back to what I was working on?
Right. Is that something you'd be willing to try?
Using my cell's notepad to write all reminders and then buying a vibrating watch and setting for time increments and reminders, I think that would be pretty helpful.
Okay. Now, I need to be straight with you. One of the major pieces in all of this, not just this that we're implementing, but anything else, is going to be committing to it and being consistent. Do you have any concerns with being consistent with either of these methods?
I think the watch would be the easier one. It'll be annoying and maybe confusing to use notes all the time.
Okay. What about it do you think would be confusing?
When I get to the point when I have 200 notes, I'll have to organize them somehow.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're on track there with organizing. Do you have an idea on how best to do that?
Would you mind looking over my notes next week? After a week's worth, we could work together to come up with categories, and I could have a separate note page for each.
Okay. I would absolutely be happy to work with you on that. But with one little change. What I'd like is we meet next Tuesday. Tuesday morning, I'd like you to go through your notes and categorize them. Because I think rather than me telling you what categories to put it in, it would make most sense for you to organize it in a way that works for you. And then I can look over that and just kind of work with you to tighten it up. How do you feel about that?
I think that'll work. Okay.
One last thing for this week. I have a tool that I would like for you to use. So this is a thought record that I'm going to give you. And basically, this tool will help you process your emotions. So I'm going to give this to you and take a look at it.
Okay, what do I do?
So when you have a situation that causes an emotional response, so for example with Patricia and the milk, it's kind of how I walked through that. Like what happened, how did you feel, how did you react after we processed it, how did you feel about that? This paper really takes you through each one of those questions.
And I should bring this with me next week?
Yes. I would like you to do at least one between now and next week. But if you would like to do more, that would be great.
Okay.
All right, Colin, I really think we've been making some great progress. And taking on all of this and trying to implement all these different changes, I think you're doing a great job. How are you feeling?
Much better than I thought it would. I really think that the new notes and reminder system will help a lot, and I'm sure there will be plenty of emotional situations for me to use paper on.
Okay, well, great. Well, keep up the work, and I will see you next week.
Okay.